Guys, I am finally enjoying watching NBA basketball this season. The reason? They are finally playing defense. It's the playoffs, and these players actually care. They're actually playing defense. Throughout the regular season, it's rare for me to watch a full NBA game. Why? It's become unbearable watching street pickup basketball, wherein they just shoot threes and play lazy defense. That is so boring. NBA basketball is not supposed to be a 250 point affair. Okay? That means they're not playing defense. The All Star game was awful this year. It's time to make a statement. Get yourself a defense is half of basketball t shirt. With the NBA Finals set to begin tomorrow night, there's a lot of talk about Kyrie Irving and sort of his ascendancy and where he ranks all time with this finals appearance, and you know, if he happened to win an NBA championship, there's a lot of talk about where he would rank, and there's a lot of conversation led by Mr. Stephen A. Myth that Kyrie is among the greatest sidekicks, second bananas, Robins of all time. And he I believe ESPN did a thing wherein they ranked LeBron's best running mates. And so, of course, this is of tremendous interest to me because the narrative is that Kobe was the, quote, sidekick or the Robin on the first three of his championships. Okay, listen, first of all, yes, there is a such thing as a great player being better than a second great player who is his teammate. Yes, there's a such thing as that. Okay? I just don't think it's worth a damn in terms of winning an NBA championship because you can't win it without that other guy. Can't win it. Okay? And second of all, what do we do about circumstances wherein the best player really is difficult to determine? We know that Isaiah Thomas was a greater player career-wise than, let's say, Joe Dumars. But in 1989 and 1990, was he actually the best player then? I don't know. I mean, they finished tied for 17th, I believe, in MVP voting in 1989, and I believe they were tied for 13th in 1990. They were damn near the same player, and Joe was better defensively. So, I mean, who was the better player? I think they split Finals MVPs. And of course, this all starts with Scottie Pippen. The narrative is that, Michael Jordan was individually great for many seasons, and then when he finally got help, he was able to get over the hump, win 6 championships and, become the consensus GOAT. And so the idea is that, the Bulls won those championships with a clear pecking order. Michael Jordan obviously being the Batman, and Scottie Pippen being, as a matter of fact, I mean, that's, Scottie Pippen is sort of a brand wherein, I mean, if you kind of label somebody a Scottie Pippen, you're basically saying that he's he's the second best player on a championship team. Here's the thing. On this channel, I have explored NBA history and explored the champions. And in the very first video of this on this channel, I provided a document wherein I listed all the great players, all of the Hall of Famers that had won championships, and I listed those championship teams by the Hall of Famers. So I went all the way back to the 60s. So I listed 8 names for the Boston Celtics, and then all the way up through the 70s and et cetera, for every championship team. I did that on my very first video. And through my exploration of NBA history, what has to be glaringly clear is that as a great player, it is virtually impossible to win the NBA championship without a fellow Hall of Famer. Only 2 people have done it. Okay. I spoke about Bill Walton in not my last video, but just recent video on his death. The day he passed. He's one of them. And I spoke about Hakeem Olajuwon. Those are the only 2 examples of players winning the NBA championship as the sole Hall of Famer. It is virtually impossible to win the NBA championship without 2 Hall of Famers. So here's my question. What exactly is being the best player on the team worth if you can't win a championship by being so? You can't, that's not enough. What exactly is it worth? It would seem to me like being the best player on the team when you don't have enough help is worth about probably a cup of coffee in terms of winning chips. Because it ain't getting you, it's barely gonna get you to the finals. Okay? It's barely gonna get you to the finals. You're not winning the chip. Okay? We talk about, we hear these conversations, and Stephen A. Smith, he uses this to knock down Kobe all the time. It's just, oh, well, he won the first 3 with Shaq, and just amazingly, he was reminded when he said this nonsense the first time. He was reminded that Magic Johnson, who he has, I believe, 4th all time, benefited from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he's continuing with that narrative. So that tells me that, shout out to Jason Whitlock, he's been installed and he has a narrative to push. Okay? He's continuing with that narrative. If you can't win the NBA championship alone, why are we giving people extra credit for being the so-called best player? Here's the other problem with that argument. Here's the other problem. There are times when a lesser player can have a greater impact on a team's fortunes. There are times. There's a thing called intangibles. There are times when a lesser player can have a greater impact on a team's fortunes than a superior team. And that may well have happened when it comes to Mike and Scottie Pippen. Okay? That may well have happened. I keep pointing out that Mike was playing with the rebounding leader and didn't even get to 500. in 1987. And then Scottie Pippen developed. So you wonder, like, how much of a component, how much of a factor was Scottie Pippen's all-around team play? How much of that was instrumental in being the glue that kept that team together? You really wonder, you know. I have said that, to me, if you establish to me beyond any shadow of a doubt that, let's just say Kobe is only the 8th best player in the world, in the NBA history, I'll take the number 8 guy over the number 1 guy if the number 8 guy has better intangibles. Okay? Intangibles are responsible for multiple NBA championships. The 2014 Spurs, the 1979 Sonics, the 2004 Pistons, you know, and perhaps even this year's Mavericks team. I just think we have it all wrong. You've got to look at basically, once we're dealing with, you know, a Hall of Fame top 75 caliber player, it basically comes down to the rings. It basically comes down to the rings. Because if a Robin can go elsewhere and pair up with another player and win more chips than the former Batman, who was actually the better player? If you're such a Batman, Robin should be easy to replace. Okay? So let's not pretend that we're talking about the difference between you know, Kyrie Irving and Robert Horry. No. We're talking about great players, Pantheon great players. When we're talking about those caliber players, it's got to be about the rings. It's got to be about the chips, because otherwise you end up discouraging players from being team first players. You know, you want players to team up with other great players. You don't want them overdoing it, you know, by building super teams. But you want players to play a role on a team, okay? And sometimes that's going to be as the team's secondary option, okay? But if you're going to only look at, or you're going to primarily look at who was the quote unquote best player on the team, and that basically comes down to who was the number 1 option throughout most of the game, who scored the most points. Okay. Let's just say hypothetically, the Mavs win this chip and win next year. So Kyrie would have 3 chips. Is he still below Kevin Durant? You know, Kyrie would have 3 chips and 5 finals appearances? You know, is he still below Kevin Durant because Kevin Durant was, quote, the best player on his teams? Why hasn't Kevin Durant been able to do it on a different team? So, you know, the metrics gotta basically be, once we're talking about, you know, great players, it really is about the rings. It really is about the rings. We can't really, you know, look at this, who was the best player. That can be a tiebreaker. You know, if two players truly were equal in terms of, you know, winning championships relative to the talent that they played with, and let's say one of them was the best player on 4 of their 5 chips and the other was the best player on all 5, you know, but that's a rare scenario. So It's got to be basically counting the rings.